What road you walking? Wide road and narrow gate, JC is my option.
Well, welcome to the Life to the Fullest podcast. I'm your host, Dan Jason, the EF3 Life platform. Happy to join us today is Chris Granozio. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Daniel. Thanks for having me on.
Well, Chris and I have a long-term relationship. I played basketball out at Lemoyne College. Chris is the voice of Dolphin Radio for the last 34 years, and we are grateful for you to join us on the show because you are going to share your story and also your new book that you released.
Yeah, thank you. I just have to give a little bit of, I have to give some shout out to Don Familo. I am the play-by-play voice, but Don's been the color man for the 34 years too. So I just don't want to hog all the glory. I certainly, I wouldn't be here without Don as well.
And they truly are a dynamic duo. I was able to get over to the Lemoyne game, NEC tournament. Definitely Dolphins are on the rise, and it's March Madness. So with that being said, I just got to ask you, who are your favorites that you're looking for in the tournament, and who are you looking forward to watching?
Well, I mean, I love every game, and I especially love when, mid-majors and, lower majors knock off some of the top teams. I just got a weird feeling about Gonzaga this year. I just love the way Ike's playing, and I have a feeling that they're going to do something special, and Mark Few is one of the best coaches, obviously. I mean, certainly you got the UConns and the Dukes and all of the perennial favorites. But I always like those stories that kind of come out of left field.
No, it's awesome. And I know that being out in Syracuse during the Lemoyne season, and now you're down in the New York City area, me being in upstate New York, obviously rooting for the Saints of Siena, just clinched the MAC title. So that's exciting to see Jerry McNamara take his first team to the big dance. I'm hoping that they can make a splash.
I'm with you. Just so you know, I watched that game last night too. I am friends with some of the coaches on both those teams that played yesterday, Siena and Merrimack. Some of those players played in Lemoyne's league in Division II. So there were a lot of connections there. And yes, I'll be rooting for Siena big time.
Yeah, and it's great to see young people doing things and really making a splash. Now, you have quite the story overall. And over the years, we've been able to grow closer together. I remember a number of times on long bus rides, us having some really in-depth conversations. And I truly appreciate your friendship, also your mentorship, and all of the ways that you've impacted me personally, because trying to become like a student athlete into a young leader, it definitely takes someone showing them the ropes. And you might not know this, but your leadership over the years has really meant a lot to me. And I preface our conversation with that because people tuning in today are going to learn a lot. They're going to learn a lot about you, but also what it takes to have courage, what it takes to have eyes wide open, and then also the importance and the power of sharing a story. So when someone thinks about becoming an author, obviously there's a lot of layers there, but maybe you could take us back to what led you to write the book Broken Men, because it's definitely a very riveting title. It's going to capture a lot of audiences in itself of the curiosity behind that. Share with us what led you to have this inkling on your heart to want to share your story.
Well, thank you. And I'm also very honored that you consider me a mentor and that I had an impact on you. So thank you for that blessing. So this story was born from an incident that happened to me, an experience I had 10 years ago now, where I met a young man from another country who was completely different from me in almost every way. Different age. I mean, he's young enough to be my son. And we found out we had a lot in common, even though we didn't speak each other's language. We were communicating literally on a translation app. It was a chance encounter at my gym, but I actually don't believe in chance encounters. I believe it was divinely orchestrated. As a believing Christian, I believe that there was something to this because it shaped my life. So we found out we had a lot in common, and one of those was a father wound. And I had never heard of the term until I saw some therapy when I was going through this. And so through father wounds, it could be that the father wasn't present, the father was abusive, the father just couldn't give the son what he needed. So we found out we both had a father wound, and we both found out we had a lot more in common too, even though we connected on a level that was not the traditional speech level. Long story short, to kind of capsulize this, when he left after his 10 days in New York, he was visiting in New York, and we met at my gym. I felt a deep wound, and I felt like I had a part of me amputated. and I didn't understand what it was. I started to wonder about my sexual orientation, and even though we didn't do anything sexual, I had a longing for being around him, even though he wasn't around, and it affected everything I did. I lost weight, I couldn't sleep, I wasn't focusing on things properly, and it came to pass that through therapy, I was very blessed to find a therapist that was specialized in this with father wounds. And also through an organization called the Mankind Project, which is very dear to my heart. I've been associated with that for 10 years now as well. That there was nothing wrong with me, that I was seeking validation from men that I didn't get from my father. And I want to make it clear that my father and I were on great terms toward the end, but when he left the family when I was at a young age, through no fault of his own, really. It was just that my parents couldn't stay together. Even though he did the best he could, I still felt the loss. So there was an unintended impact on me, even though my father was a wonderful man and I dedicated the book to him. But sometimes just the absence can create a wound. So turns out, without giving away too much from the book, this man that I had met, his name is Gustavo, he was filling a gap that I had in my life, and I was filling one in his. And one of the reasons why I wrote this book too is because I was told by my therapist that this is a very common thing with men, that because of society and its expectations on men, that we have to be tough and strong and fearless and can't show emotion unless it's rage or power, that many men keep this inside of them. There are many men that have father wounds or even just a wanting connection with other men that for a heterosexual man to think, oh my God, is there something wrong with me? Am I gay? Or all of this. And I'm not taking anything away from those who identify as gay or bisexual. But for me, as a straight man, I was really having doubts about myself, because why was I, connecting with this man on such a high level, such an emotional level, and when he was gone, we were connecting on FaceTime almost every day, and still, trying to arrange trips. Like a year later, we got to meet up again. I went down to South America with my then fiance, now wife, to meet him and see him down there. But the main reasons why I wrote this book is I wanted to destigmatize what men go through when they have a longing or an affection for another man. That is completely natural and there's nothing wrong about it. It's innocent, wholesome. But yet sometimes we as men feel pressure not to explore that or to express that openly. So I was keeping it packed down inside. I was confused. Again, the therapy and the brothers I met at Mankind Project were wonderful at helping me get through it. And then I also wanted to help bridge the gap between those who identify as other than heterosexual and heterosexual, so that we can meet on common ground and talk and not have this divide where you're the other and I'm not. So I found that was a way to connect with a different type of mindset or different lifestyle.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing part of this story. And obviously, those who want to hear the full story, make sure you get Chris's book, because he really articulates it there. And it really helps us understand that is something that more than most, I would say, would be willing to admit, right? And if we're going to survey guys and they're actually being transparent, look at themselves in the mirror, I'd say most men overall, they struggle with the fact of being able to articulate emotion, being able to articulate their feelings. And to your point of having to put on this persona as Superman all the time with the cape when things aren't just fine, right? You said going to the gym. How oftentimes do guys go to the gym to work out and other guys or even women ask them, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine, or I'm doing okay. Well, we know that sometimes we're not doing okay, and it's easy to try to mask it or to hide it. But then when we recognize the fact that vulnerability, it sometimes can be the greatest strength, obviously in a trusted environment. But when we open ourselves up, we recognize that, to your point, there could be this woundedness that two people both share. And in that sharing, they're able to join together in a sense of helping each other out, walking with each other, accompaniment, and that brotherhood. And that in itself can help the healing process. Maybe talk a little bit about how that, unfolded for you, or you've seen it even in those that you've been able to support through Mankind Project.
Yeah, so when I went through this, what's called a New Warrior training adventure, Mankind Project has chapters, we call them I groups, all over the world. And there's one in Syracuse, there's one in Albany, there are several in Western New York, and there are several down here in New York City and all over the world. So there are weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings, wherever they happen to fall, where you can get together and, as you said, be vulnerable with one another, talk about what's on our minds, what our fears are, what we're going through. I've heard some amazing shares from other men, and it's a safe space where there is confidentiality, and we can also work on some of our deeper problems or obstacles in our life. Sometimes it gets loud. Sometimes there are tears. Sometimes there's rage, people hitting things in a safe environment. But it's a way for us to experience all of that and be vulnerable and receive support. On top of everything else, it's a brotherhood. And it doesn't matter what your background is or how old you are or how you identify or what your nationality is. We all get together and we share and we support one another. There are people of opposite polar opposite religious convictions or political ideologies that get together. And I've seen some amazing connections made between these people because we all have that one thing in common, which is to support one another and to be open, honest, and authentic. So what I learned through Mankind Project was when I went to my first meeting, and this was just a few months after Gustavo left town, and I was in just this fog and just this depression. I remember starting to share on my first meeting, and I started to cry, and I just heard a voice across the circle from me. It was someone I didn't know at the time who just said, "Your tears are welcome here," and that just liberated me to the point where, like, yeah, I can finish my story. I can get through this. And I didn't feel like I was going to be judged. So that was important to me. And then the relationships I fostered with these men. And on my weekend, so they're the regular I groups, and then there are these weekends where we go deep in over 48 hours. Each man has a chance to take a really good look at his life. They hold up a mirror. It's not a cult. We don't force any ideology on anybody. But we hold up mirrors to through all these different processes and visualizations and team building exercises, and you get to look at your life and see what's working, what's not, and hey, maybe I can change somehow for the better. And they don't tell you what to do. We don't tell anyone what to do, but we can offer some tools and some support. And when I went through that weekend, the last piece of the puzzle filled in for me of what I was expecting, what I needed from Gustavo. Which is later in the book, so I don't want to give away that.
Yeah. Don't reveal it. We want everybody to check it out, and also as they're reading it, be reflective. But I think this sets the precedent for men and women, rather, because it's not. It could be a father wound, it could be a mother wound, it could be something that people are dealing with, and obviously everybody is at one point or another going to go through something that's hard in their life. That's inevitable. It's how we respond to it and who we turn to and what groups and communities that we can trust and rely and lean into. What I've recognized is the fact that those that have that support system and find ways to be able to not only cope with it, but understand who they are inwardly, then also in time, not only does healing happen, but also they're able to move forward into the dimension that God has planned for them for their life, because this blockade sometimes can really stop us from being who we're really meant to be. And it's like the one person giving you the opportunity to share, to feel comfortable, to be able to just release it. It's like 1,000 pounds is released from your shoulders and you feel this freedom. And for those who haven't experienced that, I really encourage them to get plugged in. Obviously, there's groups like AA and others of that nature. Whatever community that can help you to do that, it could be your church or it could even be a group of friends. The scripture that comes to mind is iron sharpens iron, right? As one man sharpens another, from Proverbs 27:17. we need sharpening, but at the same time, we also need a listening ear to allow us to share from the heart.
Very much so. And I've used that iron sharpens iron scripture many times. And as a man of faith, when I was going through this, even though I was depressed and very sad and longing to be with this man that I had met and connected with and felt such an affinity with, even though I was scared and confused, I still had the foundation of faith, which my mother was most responsible for in instilling in me. And I always felt, I never felt suicidal, but I understood how people could feel that way because I didn't know what was going to be next in my life. So I just, I kept praying. And even during my training, when I went on the New Warrior training adventure, which is completely non-religious, non-political, but it was open enough that I was praying throughout the entire weekend, and I felt comforted, and I felt the presence of God with me throughout that. So it's one of the things I love about the work and about my life is that I've been able to maintain my relationship with Christ and with myself that has really strengthened me and kept me
that's
through
so
it.
amazing. Yeah, it's so amazing. And people need something to be able to hold firm to. And oftentimes in our life, when we're scared, when we don't feel like we know where to turn, we don't have the answers, we're searching and we feel alone, the depression or the anxiety that starts to creep in, and we wonder, like, how's this ever going to be resolved? But the very fact that you said, these settings allow people to have that openness and to be able to have someone to just be there with them, even the very fact of presence. Sometimes I get guys that will say to me, well, I want to help my buddy out, but I don't know what to say. I'm not a therapist, you don't need to be. Honestly, it's just giving them the opportunity to share and just be there. Sometimes their very presence alone is what it takes to help someone carry themselves through and certainly connect with the right group.
Exactly. And sometimes it's not even words. Sometimes it's just a hug. And not just like that bro hug where you kind of hold each other and you break away. But I'm talking about like caring, nurturing hug that lasts. And there's something about human touch. And we're meant to touch each other. Women have the permission in society to be very affectionate toward each other. Whereas men don't do that. We don't stroke each other's hair. And I'm not saying that we have to, but it's different for women than it is for men in society. And one of the things that I learned through this experience is that I can have deeper relationships with men, not just Gustavo, but other men in my life that goes beyond just talking about cars and girls and sports. I mean, it doesn't have to be just limited to those, traditional categories.
Surface level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I've learned in time too. And unfortunately, what we like to do is to masquerade the real issues and kind of dance around them, beat around the bush, and the people don't really get to the point. And I think that comes from a fact of being scared and afraid. You mentioned it before about being judged. But when we are able to break the wall and the barriers down, and we're able to connect inwardly, the other interesting thing I've recognized is the things that oftentimes are what we might at the surface dislike about ourselves or are struggling with the most often are the things that make us most united and connect us as human beings. Because if you're going through a hard thing and I'm going through a hard thing and together we're deciding to do this, it cannot help but make the bond stronger, and everything else about life and that friendship becomes more beautiful, right?
Very much so. Yeah, well articulated. And one of the things I love too is that when we share in our group, and it's very similar to Alcoholics Anonymous in that we share and we keep it confidential. But men will say, hey, I've got a lot of fear over something coming up, and oftentimes a man in the group will say, how many of us are feeling fear right now? And we hold up our hands, and it was like it takes away that weight, as you mentioned, on our shoulders. It takes that away when I see that there are other men that are feeling it with me. I don't feel so much alone anymore.
So the first step, obviously, is having the courage to to show up and to recognize that this wound exists. The second is to be able to share or articulate it. After that, what would you say would be a couple tangible things that men could do, whether they're in a group or not, whether they're by themselves or they're, starting to journey and try to really tackle this thing, that they can use to cope or to be able to, in a more healthy manner, recognize what they're struggling with in order to approach it in a responsible way?
Great question. I think it's different for every man. For some men, it might be therapy. For some men, it might be brotherhood or joining a group like Mankind Project. For others, it might be journaling. It might be prayer. It might be a combination of these things. For me, I was very fortunate. I'm a writer as well as an announcer. So I write a lot, mostly about basketball, but I've written about other things. So I had that outlet, that creative outlet. And one of the things that helped get me through this was I started putting pen to paper and writing this out as a story. Even though I didn't know the ending, I wanted to write it all out. So it was a combination of a journal and also the structure, the skeleton of a story. And initially I wrote it as a screenplay for a movie because I saw it as very cinematic. And then a friend of my mother's, who was a publisher, said, "Hey, this is an amazing story. If you write this as a novel, I'll publish it." Well, it turns out, unfortunately, he died during COVID, and I didn't have that opportunity anymore, that outlet. But I did find a publisher that was interested after going through other routes, trying to get a literary agent. And thankfully, I've got a publisher. And so far, the early reviews of the book are off the charts good. Like, it's been all 5-star reviews. So with people being very moved and touched by it. So my goal was to help a couple of men. And now I'm getting replies from men and women who are touched by the story. And you talked about father wounds. Women have them too. It's not just men, but it's different with the opposite sex. It shows up in a different way. But for men, when that affirmation isn't there from the father, it could really be something that is I don't want to say toxic, but it could have irreparable effects.
Yeah, and obviously when people have the woundedness, regardless of where it is coming from, they will then have symptoms that will lead them into certain things that maybe they never thought they would end up in, right? And that's where certain addictions and certain maybe unhealthy habits start happening because we're trying to diminish the pain instead of really responsibly attacking the problem. And that's natural and that's understandable. And probably many have been there and have done it. What we recognize is we're still feeling empty and kind of layering the problems on top. Whereas when we do have the courage to attack it, then things can start to progress forward. So when it comes to your story, it sounds like you really were just organically working through this father wound and trying to configure ways to approach it, to accompany Gustavo and yourself and through this. It's almost like, it reminds me that sometimes in our life, when there's pain, when there's difficulty, when there's maybe even a mess of a situation, that God can make a transformative happening. And it almost like, you said nothing happens by happenstance or chance. I once heard it said that chance is the logic of God. Like, leading us into a new dimension. So how did that progress, right? You started saying you were writing these different ideas down. How did it then to just formalize into a complete book? Because I know a lot of people who like to journal. They like to write down things on a daily basis. Not a lot of people are publishing a book or courageous enough to share their full story.
Yeah, for me, obviously, it was a natural extension of what I do. And my parents were both writers. And my mother, actually, right before she died last year, she helped me go through the novel one more time and literally line by line, paragraph by paragraph. We went through everything. And she didn't rewrite it, but she just said, "You need to flesh this out more," or "I think this could be stronger," or "That doesn't really serve you," or whatever. And she gave me those, and I took her notes, and I went back to the drawing board, and I didn't have to reconstruct anything, but there were a couple of things where I felt like I could make it better, and I believe they were all wonderful ideas. To answer your question, I think whatever a particular man needs, then he should seek it out and just pray and trust in your heart that you'll know what you need and then seek it out, whatever it is, therapy, a creative outlet, brotherhood of some kind, just maybe just to share with choose one person and just have a dialogue with them. One of the things that my therapist said, and he was instrumental in my publishing the book, he said, hey, you need to write this book. He says, I'm an expert on the father wound, and there's no book out there like this. He said, you've got to tell your story. So I did, and I know that it's going to help others just by seeing that they're not alone. And it's funny, you talked about, God's logic being, what was the word?
Like chance or happenstance is the
Chance.
logic of God. Yeah.
So that's kind of, that dovetails with a line that I hear a lot, which is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And that's what happened to me. I couldn't have been happier. I was, everything in my life was going swimmingly, or so I thought. And I didn't know there was this, I always knew there was some sadness in me about something not connecting with others, but I didn't feel there was anything wrong with me. And then when this happened, it was like a lightning bolt. And I knew that I had to tackle it. And I do believe it was inspired by God. And my therapist said, you're very lucky, because a lot of people go through their life and they never have the courage or the knowledge to go after it, to figure out what it is. And sometimes it comes out sideways in abusive behavior to another, or, self-destructive behavior, such as, taking drugs or suicide or alcoholism, whatever. I was lucky in that I continued to have the faith, and I continued to pursue what it was that I needed for my own health.
Yeah, I think two things that you had mentioned there is trust. You said you had to trust God, and
Yes.
That verse from Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." And it's hard to do that when we are in darkness. It's hard to do that when there's no end in sight, and maybe the pain is starting to stack up. But we stay in it a little bit longer. We recognize the fact that sometimes when we feel the most pressed down, when we open ourselves up the most, it allows God in even a little bit. And that's where some of that change happens, but it takes time, right? The healing takes time. The other thing is, you said, don't write your plans in stone, so to speak. I think sometimes we have unreasonable expectations, even of ourselves. We put too much pressure on ourselves, or who we have to be, or what other people are thinking, that the way that we should live. If we write our plans in pencil, and we know that, sometimes God will use the eraser and he'll rewrite them, it can often open up a new avenue and a new approach to realize we don't have to be perfect. And there's nobody who will be, and it's okay. And I think the conversations that I have had with guys that are really transparent have understood that, and they give themselves a little bit of grace. So hopefully people can season their life and even their friendships, their relationships, their past, and understand that grace is definitely needed.
It is, and I believe that we get the greatest graces through whenever we connect with God or higher power, however you want to say it. If you knock, the door will be opened, and if you seek, you will find. And I think for me, I was always seeking, always exploring, and I wasn't hiding from it. I wasn't burying it, and that's what got me through ultimately. And God's grace, for sure.
Amen. So where can people find your book? How did they get it? And how can they follow you?
So initially, it's just was released recently. So it's available only right now on the Dorrance website. Dorrance is the publisher, Dorrance. If you go to Dorrance or Dorrance Books, you can find it. And within a couple of weeks, there's going to be a big marketing campaign, and it's going to be available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon and all the regular outlets, familiar outlets. But if you want it right away, and it's actually a little more profitable for me if you do buy it off the Dorrance, because there's no middleman, so to speak. So if you go to Dorrance, I think it's Dorrance.com. But if you just look up Dorrance Books, there's a bookstore there, and you can order it from there. It's called Broken Men. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate you being just so transparent, courageous to share your story. We hope that others were inspired by this. If you know somebody that might be inspired by Chris's story, and if you're able to get a copy of his book and you read it, please make sure that you share this show so that way they can learn more. Also, maybe you could share with us as well about where they can learn about the Mankind Project, because that's been instrumental in your journey.
Yeah, it is, and it's a wonderful organization. It's and you don't it's they don't force you to do anything. You get to share whatever you want, and you can sit there and pass if you want. But it's worth trying out and seeing if it fits for a man. And that's simple. It's mankindproject.org. And if you want to take a new warrior training adventure, they have the links for it there, or they'll just tell you, they'll have numbers where you can call and find where the nearest I group or chapter is for you.
Awesome. Yeah. So make sure that you check out Chris's book, Broken Men. Again, thank you again, Chris, for joining the show. We wish you the best this spring and all of your future endeavors.
Same to you, Daniel. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and God bless you.